I'm just going to call this Board of Education meeting today, call to order today, Monday, June 27th. Jonathan will not be here, so I will be chairing in his absence. Can we all please rise for the pledge of allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We don't have anybody signed up for public comment. Okay.
Public comment?
Can you
Sure.
please come up?
Yep.
Come forward, please. If you would just state your name, please, and your address for the record, and you'll
Sure.
have 3 minutes.
Rich Conley, 31C, Kitchener Street, here at Ridgefield. I'm trying to get some clarification on the transportation to Regional Center for the Arts issue. So far, I have gotten nothing but runaround. I've asked several pointed questions, received no answers whatsoever. As far as I can tell, the district does not intend to live up to its promise, in which it stated that it would provide transportation to RCA for all 4 years of my child's high school experience. 1 year has passed, and we're now told that the district is going to cancel that promise. I'm just looking for answers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Conway, this is one item on the agenda this evening. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Yes, I was just going to mention. Anyone else? And moving on, the chairman report. So before I go to acknowledge somebody whose last meeting today, I just want to take a quick minute and thank everyone and all the board members who did come to the RHS graduation and all the staff that made it amazing. Once again, on behalf of the entire board, to all the graduates for this year, congratulations and wishing you the best in the next chapter of your life. I also wanted to say a big quick thank you to all the board members who did come to the various moving out ceremonies. It was great to be part of it. And thank you to all the staff administration who made that possible for all our kids. I'll come to that. So today will be Ken's last meeting with us today. I will open the floor for everyone who wants to speak for Ken. But very quickly on my behalf, I want to just say this. I'm very privileged to call Ken more than a board colleague, but also a friend. Ken has been a wonderful support, sounding board, and yes, a great grammar editor when needed for all of us. His ability to see all points of views have been and keep the well-being of all kids as the guiding point that drives all his questions, his conversations, and decisions is something that I sincerely have always appreciated. Ken, you've been at every board meeting since you were elected in 2019. You became part of the COVID walls where everything went remote. In 2019 to 2020, you served on 3 committees. You served on the Budget, Finance, and Operation Committee. You served on the Strategic Planning and Advocacy Committee and the Policy Committee. In 2020-21, you were elected as Vice Chair. You served on 4 committees that time. You were Chair of Budget, Finance, and Operations Committee. You were Chair of Strategic Planning and Advocacy Committee, Policy Committee, and Negotiations Committee. And in 2021-22, you served on 3 committees. You were Chair of both Budget, Finance, and Operations Committee, Strategic Planning and Advocacy Committee, and Policy Committee. That's a lot of work for behalf of all our kids. So thank you for everything you've done. You will truly be missed. Anybody else want to go? Great.
Just a couple words. I'm going to reiterate what I said during policy. You're going to be truly missed, Ken. I'm privileged to have known and worked with you on the board, and our children, families, and community at large is just better to have had you in this role. So I wish you and your family all the best.
Anyone else?
Sure. Ken, congrats on the move. Hope all goes smooth with you and the dog, especially the dog. It's been good serving with you.
Yes, Ken.
Thank you.
That's
okay. That's okay. I have a couple.
I'll go ahead. Yep. Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank all the members of the board, especially the ones that I've had the pleasure of serving with for all 3 years. I think if I'm most proud of one contribution to the board, it's the part that I did play in welcoming Dr. De Silva to the district. I think that was a good move on part of the board, and I think the district is heading in a very positive direction. To the 2 points that I want to make. One is the Board of Education. We work very hard at doing what's best for the children of Ridgefield, and we're going to continue doing that. Very often we find that the struggle comes in with when it comes down to budget. There are a lot of things that we would like to do to not only sort of maintain the education system we have now, but to move it forward. And I think that's very important for our district. And we often have great difficulty doing that when it comes down to sort of getting budgets approved. And a lot of that comes down to the Board of Finance. And it's, we are now dealing in this day and age with the advent of social media. And often when decisions are made at the board table, often the ire comes out in social media, and it's often misdirected at the board or members of the board. There are many things that we would be able to do, that we would want to do, that we're unable to do because of the restrictions placed on us by the Board of Finance and to a smaller degree the Board of Selectmen. So if we want real change in the way that our budgets are structured, that's going to have to come to the Board of Finance. So that's up to the public to make that known. We can do what we can with what we're given, and that's not always what we feel that we need for our district. The other thing is I have been very proud to serve on this particular board. I think we have accomplished not as many great things as we would have wanted to. We were able to accomplish several great things. And I think once we got into the boardroom, we were most successful when we were able to put our political differences aside and focus on what's important, and which is the children of our district. And I think for the large part, we were able to do that. And I know, even it's not Republican, it's not Democrat. I think we're Board of Education members, and we were able to, again, for the most part, not always, but it was every decision we made was for the kids. And when we put our personal agendas aside, or even our party's agendas aside, that's when we were most successful, and that's when we got the things accomplished that we were elected to do. So again, thank you very much, and thank you to the town of Ridgefield for giving me the privilege and the honor of serving on the Board of Ed.
Thank you. Moving on, Dr. Silva.
Yeah, so I'm just going to stay along that theme with Ken and thanking you really for everything that you give. I think really I was actually going to thank the Board of Ed this evening, but I'm going to start with you because I think what folks sometimes don't realize is the amount of time and effort that goes into serving on the Board of Education. I wish I could say it's just Monday evenings, but you all know it's not just Monday evenings. It is preparing for Monday evenings and the amount of work that you all do to prepare for Monday evenings. It's the amount of time that goes into being a part of a committee and preparing for that committee. And I think you said it really well, Ken, is that this Board of Education has been incredibly successful because they've partnered together around the work that needs to happen for kids. And so for as much as things might get messy, and they do, and I don't think that good comes without sometimes being messy, the reality is at the end of the day, I believe that every single board member that sits at this table truly, truly believes in children. And your leadership on this board has definitely aligned itself with that mission and the mission of our district. So we can't really thank you enough. I'm incredibly sad, as my colleagues know. I can get very emotional. I'm going to hold it back tonight. But the reality is we are incredibly fortunate, as Wicked would say, right? Because we've met you. So thank you. And in honor of
most importantly, your son that has joined us for many of board meetings with his artwork. The book Oliver is dedicated to the Farmingville Library, where your wife taught once. So we will be doing, just kind of, even though it's not him, it looks like him. So that is, and Wes is not here, because otherwise we would create a cheeky certificate for you, but maybe we'll have him do it when you get back. So this is actually a nice one, but we just again want to honor you and appreciate you for all the outstanding work that you have done on behalf of the kids of Ridgefield. And for those that graduated this past Friday, you have no idea how much work these folks put in on your behalf. And because at times we may need you to substitute where you need so again, thank you. And so what I did share with Ken at the start is really this is a moment, it's our last board meeting of the year. We're back August 22nd, which is like a month away, but we're going to pretend that's not real, right? But really thank you on behalf of the kids of Ridgefield families. You are active, you are engaged, you're participating in as much as you can reasonably participate in. We know that this isn't your only thing. You have work and other volunteer activities, but to see your faces at all of these events, early morning meetings, interview committees, I mean, folks can see a piece of it, but they really don't recognize, I'm sure that they don't recognize how much we ask of each of you, maybe because they don't know me well enough, because if they did, they probably would know how much we ask of each of you. But we're incredibly, incredibly appreciative. Our district continues to move forward because each and every one of your contributions. So on this last official board meeting of the school year, I would like to thank all of you and wish you a wonderful summer. That said, just a couple of other things. Like Tina mentioned, we had some great moving ups and graduations that were just such a pleasure to be a part of, incredibly inclusive of all kids. You just saw the labor, the work that everyone puts into this community, just walking across the stage. You heard me mention it today, Ridgeberry's wasn't so quiet. I'm still like taking it back. It was the quietest moving up that I've ever been a part of, but each and every one of them, that was the last one that I saw at the elementary level, and so whether it was Ridgeberry, Veterans Park, Farmingville, all of them, just a real special opportunity to be a part of. Our middle school is the same thing, and just like you would expect in Salem, put us on stage last minute, right? But it was just so nice to see the kids walking across the stage, and of course our high school over at WestCon. Hopefully we'll come back to Ridgefield sometime soon on the turf rather than at WestCon, but if not, WestCon's great. Just would love, right, Joe, to be back on the turf?
Not making
No,
eye
this is the way it goes in this place.
That was not a yes.
Yeah, no eye contact with Joe. Just one last thing that I'd like to just take a moment to just communicate is that recently there has been a rumor. Now, I wouldn't normally address a rumor, but I feel like this topic is too important not to address. So the rumor has been that we've been hearing about DEI being canceled in our schools. I want to be clear that in pre-K to 12, we have and will continue to work to provide environments that are inclusive, equitable, accessible, and spaces where all of our students are welcomed, valued, and feel a sense of belonging. Spaces where our faculty comes to work and also feel welcomed, valued, and a feeling of belonging. There are many, many layers to this work, and the work doesn't end or get canceled. Our kids come to school to be in environments that are inclusive, equitable, accessible, welcoming. We are a learning organization, which also means that we're always striving to be better and responsive to the needs of our faculty and our students. We also recognize the importance of study, feedback, collaboration, and professional learning to increase our toolkit. I would encourage anyone who has questions or wonders to reach out to me or my incredibly responsive team directly. We will help you understand the context of our schools and what programs we do offer, what practices we offer. We are always willing to listen and understand feedback. And that is it. Happy summer.
Thank you. Moving on to committee chairs and liaison reports.
So the policy committee, we met on Monday, 6/20, and we have 4 policies coming forward this evening for a first read.
Thank you, Rachel. Anyone else?
We did have a budget meeting that I chaired in Ken's absence. We do have some transfers coming up later on in the meeting.
Thank you.
Legislatively, there's 2 things to just watch that CAVE actually recommended that we make sure we bring up is Connecticut has modified the requirements for parent-teacher conferences. So we just need to make sure our policies align with that for the number that is required for the new legislation.
We did it recently.
Perfect, okay.
We're gonna talk
So you
about
guys
it.
are already ahead of me, so forget it. I retract my commentary. But that's it.
Thank you. I think you missed RPC. I'll give a quick update for RPC. The Ridgefield Prevention Council had a last meeting. They're looking for anybody who's listening in. They're looking for any high school students who want to be part of the committee, and you can join the meetings before you decide to be part of the committee. And they have some events coming up which will be posted on their website. For the Energy Task Force, they had a quick meeting which I could not attend, but very quickly they talked about the solar status, they talked about LED, they talked about ventilation for Veterans Park, which is still unknown as yet. I think they submitted the ARPA application. They talked about EV charging stations and some goals for 2030. That includes CG fossil fuels reduction goal of 45%. No one else? Thank you. Right, moving on to approval of minutes.
I move that the Board of Education approve the minutes from the meeting on April 4th, 2022.
Anyone second?
Second.
Yes. Any amendments, edits?
Okay, so underneath the correspondence report, just the last sentence, so it should just say 3 emails shared, feedback on bullying concerns.
Right. All those in favor to approve the minutes as suggested by, with the edited suggestions by Rachel, please raise your hands. All in favor, thank you. So the motion for the minutes for June 8th.
I move that the Board of Education approve the minutes from the meeting on June 8th, 2022.
Anyone second? Okay. Any edits?
One, Thomas Collins was present for the meeting on 6/8.
All those in favor to approve the minutes as amended, as suggested by Rachel, all in favor? Anyone abstain? Yes. So moved. Thank you. All right, moving on to the discussion and possible action items. First up is the financial report ending May 31st.
Okay, so this is a heavy budget, a heavy agenda for Jill, and Jill is on holiday, but joining us virtually. Jill, can you hear us okay?
I can. Can you hear me?
Oh,
Should we do the motion?
Oh, sorry.
Yes, and then we can do the
Hang
discussion.
on, Jill, is that order?
Yeah.
I move that the Board of Education accept the financial report ending May 31st, 2022.
Anyone second? Okay, and now we're going to discussion.
All right, we're just gonna. Okay, there you go, Jill, you are set.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay, great. So tonight's report is the budget snapshot taken on May 31st. And similar to the prior month's report, the district continues to be under budget in both certified and non-certified staff lines, which are offsetting overages and lines for substitute coverage and special education tuitions. In health benefits, the district will have a surplus amount this year, and we did go to the Board of Finance meeting last week and request that the town set aside these funds, possibly to support adaptive playgrounds in some of our school sites. Other benefits that include non-certified pension contributions, OPEB, life insurance, short-term and long-term disability are all tracking on budget, as is FICA and Medicare. In special education, the budget tends to be somewhat volatile as we progress through any given year, but even more so as we approach year end. So we've now received both excess cost grant installments, and the total, as we knew, it's falling short of our 1.4 million anticipated amount. It's falling short by about $229,000. We've also seen increases in tuition costs and services for students with IEPs. And so these two components together are causing this area of the budget to trend over as we approach year end. Once all of our final invoices have been paid for the month of June, we'll be able to close those purchase orders and report out the amount of deficit in this area. Overall transportation costs, including the regular bus contract, our special education transport in and out of town, and athletics, together collectively is trending on budget. Similar to the special education tuition, we've got to get through the month of June and wait those final invoices before we can close out and report where we've landed with regard to transportation. And then lastly, with regard to energy costs, we had an electrical contract of 0.10690 per kilowatt hours that runs through November of 2022. We're currently working with our providers to monitor the generation rates for 22-23. Additionally, we were successful in locking in an oil bid at $2.4477 per gallon, but we went through all of that gallonage in mid-April. So we recontracted out at $3.85 for another 20,000 gallons to end the year. We're hoping that we're going to see pricing come back in line, and if not, we'll go to a spot market in July. So in summary, projections for fiscal year end show budget overages in special education tuition, in fuel oil, and in substitute positions, while we're showing revenue shortfalls related to special education excess cost grant, and also in sporting revenue, we're a little short. Most budget overages can be offset with our savings related to unfilled certified and non-certified positions and other areas in the budget which have not been fully expended. We do anticipate some additional surplus in addition to the HSA savings. We're unable to pinpoint exactly right now, but we do anticipate some surplus as we end the year. And that is the financial report to end May. Anyone have any questions?
Tina, if it's okay with you before we move on, Jill, do we want to just talk now to the Board of Ed around our discussion on how we communicate to the Board of Finance versus the Board of Education in terms of timing?
Oh, sure. Okay. So we met with the Board of Finance last week, and it was the day after we had given the end of May report to the subcommittee, the Budget and Finance Subcommittee, which of course is a public meeting. And when we go to the Board of Finance, I think I would be most comfortable giving that most updated information, although it lagged a week behind giving the report to the full Board of Ed. It felt uncomfortable to me to go back and give them an April 30th report when we had just given the May 31st report to our subcommittee. So I wondered if we could maybe come to maybe a different timing or platform so that we could give the most updated information each month.
So we could bring this back to our Budget and Finance Committee, but the dilemma that Jill experienced is here we were the day before with our committee having a very public discussion about May, and then the following day she's there at the Board of Finance meeting with a discussion on April. And at least my experience in the past couple of years, it's felt like a little disingenuous when they're asking questions about May, or let's just say in this example, May, but we're like, we can't talk about that yet because we haven't talked about it at the Board of Finance, at the Board of Education meeting, but yet a few days before or a week before, we just had a public meeting that anyone could have seen. Does that make sense?
I get it, but so is that document a board communication or a district communication? Because I think that's the delineation that would drive us.
So that's a really good question. So as it stands right now, is that the the Budget and Finance Committee receives the entire packet. The Board of Education receives it full board receives it at the board meeting. So what we did at that meeting is we spoke very globally, anything that could have been heard.
Right, but that document, are we speaking as a board, does it require a vote to share it out? Or is it a district communication? Because those are two very different things.
That's right, you have to say that.
So I think the question is if there's anything on the document that would require a vote, right? That would probably be different. So I think we could probably go through our policies to be sure that there's nothing that we're in violation of. And at our next Budget and Finance Committee meeting in the fall, or August, whenever that is, have a discussion of when it makes most sense. Because to Jill's point, when you're sitting there in June, talking about April, it doesn't feel like there's a context there to the questions that they logically would have, right? Because they're thinking about year end and we're still talking about 2 months ago.
I get it. The delineation, at least in the budget and finance, and I only have limited exposure, is there's two parts of that. One is the financials, one is the transfers. The transfers typically have to come here for a vote.
Correct, yes.
The financials, there's typically
You just
barely even discussion on it.
Yeah, you're right.
So that's why I'm wondering if that part could be parsed out
Yeah.
as a district communication, and that way it could be passed
Not
through without
only that.
having necessarily be voted on. The transfers can still come to the board for a vote.
Okay, that makes sense.
Maybe I'm just looking at it all.
No. Yes, Kim.
So we did not discuss transfers at that meeting at all.
Right.
It was just a financial snapshot overview for them.
So it could be simpler than we think.
Yeah. Alternatively, would it be possible to have that discussion, say, the 6:30 before the 7 o'clock board meeting, so that those transfers could be discussed, with that report, and the transfers and everything else we need to discuss could be discussed prior to the board meeting and voted on at that board meeting?
So it would depend on the timing of the Board of Finance meeting. So it could work just perfectly
Right.
if that's when the Board of Finance meeting is. If not, then it could be.
Well, rather than having the alternate weeks, because I
Right.
think, in this case, I think maybe that would have solved. I think Sean's point is more telling, because it's not something that we approve, it essentially Jill's reporting to us
Right.
what has already happened, so it's not, there's nothing that the board has to act on.
Okay, so we'll process that a little bit, and when we look at our meetings for the fall, we can try to see if there's a way to make that work. And if not, then we would look at the financials as an opportunity there and not the transfers. Okay.
Any other questions? Yes, let's have the vote for this, and then we'll move on to the transfers. Right, we had a second, all those in favor of approving the budget as presented? Any abstain? So moved. All right, moving on.
I move that the Board of Education approve the budget transfers presented on June 27, 2022.
It's ready.
Second.
Thank you, Kim. Jill, do you want to talk about it, Jill?
So with regard to transfers that happened during the month of May, there was nothing unusual to report. There were several transfers requested within departments to move funding to pay those final invoices that we're now beginning to receive. These types of requests are pretty much winding down now, but have continued into the first half of June. But they're subsided over the last week or so. The largest transfer that we had was in the curriculum lines. Many teachers did not attend in-person conferences this year, so funds were moved to literacy books and resources to purchase supplemental materials for professional development happening in district. And that was it for May transfers.
Anyone have any questions? Right. All those in favor to accept the budget transfers as presented for June 27? All in favor, thank you. Right, moving on to the next discussion and possible action item, recoding of the financial year 23 budget line.
I move that the Board of Education approve the transfers to the entirety of planning and budget line 950,000 to 100.2210.7302.65 $1,000.93.0000 computer equipment district-wide for the 22-23 fiscal year.
Do you have a second? Thank you, Sean.
Okay, you're up again, Jill.
So when I was reviewing the fiscal year 23 budget, we realized that the entire technology equipment budget, which consists of $950,000 for next year, is tied with the special education code. You see that 100.1200. Anytime there's a 1200 in the function part of the account string, that tags that expenditure as a special education expenditure, and then subsequently it's reported to the state at the end of the year. So that's done in error. Not quite sure why that happened, but I just know that we need to transfer it to just a district-wide general regular education hardware line. That caused us to look back into the current year and years back, because we don't want to overstate our expenditure with regard to special education. So we do have a correction to make for this year's spending, which we'll do with an end of the year journal entry. But prior to this current year, I don't see it anywhere else in prior years. So that's good news, and we can correct it immediately and moving forward. So that's why we're recommending this sort of recoding of fiscal year 23 budget.
So likely a clerical error, because it didn't happen years prior, so it happened in this current year. Wouldn't be something that that any one of us would necessarily pick up when we look at our budget books, because those codes are a little bit complicated, and as Rachel just went on and on, they're long, and so we wouldn't have picked it up. But what Jill did was, when she was reviewing fiscal year 23, she happened to notice that 1200, made the connection between special ed, and we realized that that was a clerical error this year. So the good news is we can fix it for this year with a journal entry, and fix it for next year, and then with this year just make the adjustment in a journal entry.
Any questions?
Thank you for finding it.
Yes, thank you, Jill.
Can we vote? Did the Board of Education approve the transfer of the entire, I won't read it, for the 2022-23 fiscal year? All those in favor? So moved, all in favor, thank you. Moving on to the next discussion item, magnet scheme transportation.
Van purchase funding.
Van purchase funding.
Oh, sorry, van purchase funding, my bad.
Can we go over
Yes.
it? Okay.
Yes, please.
Jill, do you wanna do van purchase funding?
Sure.
Okay.
So earlier in the current school year, there were 2 10-passenger vans purchased. The total amount for those 2 vans was $84,607. The purchase was made through the general fund. I think back at the original time of purchase, the thought was it may be moved to grants to the SRR funding. There was a revision done to the SRR to be able to make that expenditure adjustment, but because our general fund can handle this purchase, my recommendation was leave it in the general fund, leave the revision in the grant, which would allow you to purchase 2 additional plans, because we think that this is going to offer some flexibility and savings to the district. We haven't received them yet, but there's a lot of opportunity here for savings. And if you have 2 more, 1 or 2 more through the SRR purchase, I think that it would benefit the district greatly. So that was the recommendation there.
So just to provide further context, the vans are expected, quote unquote, expected at the end of July. In the event that for some reason that doesn't happen by the end of July, we have a plan B for those runs. Hopefully they won't be long and they're not contracted for the entire year, but will get us through if we need to, let's say August or September. And what this does allow us to do is, if we do yield the funds or the savings that we're hoping to yield with the 2 10-passenger vans, then we can purchase the other 2 through the grant. The grant's already been revised, I wrote it myself, it's already been approved, so it should be an easy purchase. Just as a point of a reminder is that we had to purchase these early on. I think we purchased somewhere in late fall. because otherwise we wouldn't get them in time, and as you can see, we're still waiting. So that's the reason they went from operating to begin with, plus we needed the opportunity to revise the grant and get it approved. And now we're in a good position to say, let's leave them there, our general operating budget can handle it, and then if we need to, and we're ready to, we'll purchase the additional 2 through ESSER.
I just have a question about the drivers still coming through for a student?
So we actually looked, ultimately, there's a possibility, but what we did look to do is we have a posting for our drivers, because we're gonna need some flexibility
Okay.
within routes and timing. Further, if we need paras, we're gonna have to hire those as
Yeah.
well, which we do through First Student.
Okay.
Now, the training, we are looking at opportunities to collaborate with First Student if necessary, for training, licensure, those types of things, but otherwise, it will be, hopefully, we'll be able to find our drivers. It's posted, and we're thinking about creative ideas in the event that we can't. What is the second, plan B?
Okay. Thank you.
Anything I missed there, Jill?
I don't think so.
Yeah, Dr. Rizzo, just a question for my own learning. Is there a time constraint with ESSER 3 for us to buy the other 2?
Yes, so I believe ESSER 3, ends in June of, 2024.
Okay.
So
Yes.
we'll be able to, hopefully, we'll be able to purchase our 2 vans.
Right.
We'll be able to run Summer Bridge 1 more year. And if all goes well, we'll be able to provide our students with the extra tutoring experience that we offered this year, K-12. That's the plan as of right now. I don't know that it'll be able to hold any more than that, but that is the plan.
Thank you so much.
I have one more question. Do we, sorry.
No.
Do we have an estimated savings number, for the ROI on these, on the other 2? I know that there's a lot of theory, and I know we have trouble with external transportation firms, but it would be nice to attach an actual expected return, so we can start to balance this, especially if it's gonna stay in general fund, right? That was,
Yeah, so I think what we anticipated was the savings, Liz, and don't quote me on the exact amount, but it was somewhere between 125 and 150.
okay.
But that's not including the cost of the vans,
And that's
obviously.
annualized or a one-time?
Well, in this particular budget year, it's that amount. So
Okay.
one would anticipate that it's annualized if we can find the high cost
and
students.
resource, yeah.
Yeah, the high cost students is the, and if we can get the timing to work out. So it really is a little bit of, a game of Tetris in terms of puzzle pieces. And our new transportation director alongside Dr. Hanaway and myself, we've been looking at all of our routes and saying, okay, where do we get the biggest bang for our buck? So sometimes it is distance, but then on the other hand, they can't pick anyone else up or drop anyone else off. So it's just finding the right timing, and then having somebody come back into district and perhaps having a different route. So we're doing morning and afternoon for both vans, and we're looking at maximizing even the opportunities within the midday. So for example, we have students in our 18 to 22 program that have events that are happening throughout the middle of the day. And so instead of using First Student for that, looking at using our vans, it also helps with the extended hours that we get charged. And so it's just, the analytical part is finding the amount of hours that just works out perfectly without being in a position where we have to now offer benefits, which is more costly.
Yeah, it would be nice if we're gonna ask for funding, especially out of that wasn't anticipated, that's this large of a capital asset. It would be nice to have the factors at least laid out, even if you don't know the actual values. As someone who does route optimization and capital purchases all the time, it would just be nice on this one especially, because going this route could be a harbinger of things to come, right? I've been a part of a district that owned all their own buses, and it was why our budget was reasonable on a regular basis, because we didn't have to lease out tons of buses. And so I do think that this could be proven, but I think it's nice to have a memo, it's nicer to have numbers.
So I think, Liz, you asked us for this very early on when we purchased the
I
vans,
did.
but at that time, it was honestly incredibly tentative. So I
Yeah.
think once we break this fall, we should be able to provide you with a more factual data point on where the return of investment is
Yeah.
on both of them.
Okay, I would like to come back to this on a regular basis. I do think that this is something, whenever we invest in something, whether it's quantifiable savings, we should be calling that out. Because I think it's also important for the community to hear where we're doing really well there. there's so much in education that can't really be quantified, right?
So-
In terms of dollars and cents. I mean,
So why don't we we'll plan on doing like a fall, winter, or spring.
No, you won't. Probably not.
In particular, when we begin to transition into the possible purchase of the other two, because the reality is, we may want to do that sooner than later, knowing that when we actually get them, maybe a year from now.
Any other questions, comments? Right, moving on.
Okay, I move that the Ridgefield Board of Education discontinue district paid transport of RPS students to the Regional Center for the Arts located at 23 Oakview Drive in Trumbull, Connecticut as of June 30th, 2023.
Do you have a second?
Do we have to vote on the van one
No,
first, or we're doing
that's what we don't have that as a motion.
Sorry.
No. I asked the same question to Rachel, right? It's,
Yeah.
we don't have it.
Well, it was
just an update, right?
It was just an update, I don't think we did. It's
Because
already
we've already
in the budget,
That's
yes,
exactly,
I'm just.
that's why I,
Information.
Yeah, it was information, I just want to be transparent that we're not moving it out of the budget, which is what
it's still,
we ultimately would have done.
sorry, so did we have a second for Rachel? Sean? Dr. DeSilva,
Okay, you ready, Jill, on magnet school?
I am, yes. So as a Board of Education, we're required to pay tuition, which supports the choice of magnet schools, but we are not required to provide transport outside of the Ridgefield area for students that attend magnet schools. For the past many years, Ridgefield has been providing transportation to families that attend the Regional Center for the Arts, which is located in Trumbull. Though it appears as though we've been doing that erroneously. Students that attend the RCA program, it's a little unique because they attend Ridgefield High School in the morning, then they head over to the RCA program at about 12:30, and then they're each transported home. We have 4 students currently that are attending RCA, 2 9th grade students and 2 10th grade students. We also have 4 students that attend magnet schools outside of Ridgefield, both in Stamford and in Danbury, and we do not provide transportation for those students. However, those are full-day programs, so it's a little bit different. Just to give you an idea of the cost for the 4 students, it was $17,658 for this year. We do receive a grant from the state of Connecticut. This year the grant was $6,456, which means that the cost to the district is $11,201.90, so $202. We do recognize, though, as Mr. Conley had spoke about, that students receive specialized curriculum, they make friends, they build relationships with other students, teachers, and families, and it feels, we don't want to pull the rug out from these students. So our suggested recommendation to you was to recognize that we are providing something above and beyond what we're required to do, but to give a healthy 1-year notice so that families could make other arrangements or what have you. And that was what we had suggested to the board.
Just to add, in terms of context of this cost, this could change in a different direction, because what happens now is we happen to have the extra bus available. So if that, at that particular time, midday, if that bus wasn't available, we would actually be paying for the cost of the bus also. So there's that piece, and because it's in this particular case, the timing of it, there's extended hours as well. So it's hard to say to the board that it's 11,202. That's true, we know that for next year, but the following year, it could be more. And the following year after that, it could be more. And depending upon the number of students participating, if less students participate, then the grant award is less. If more students participate, naturally, the grant award is more. So our recommendation this year, because there is a known, and obviously it was a mistake on the part of the district, and we recognize that, but we know it now. And so in an effort to be transparent and also be conscious of taxpayer money in our policy, because we have a policy that doesn't support this financial add to the budget. But it was a mistake, and now that it's there, we think a year's notice is appropriate and fair. And again, I couldn't say to the board, let's do 3 years and it be 11,202 times 3, because unfortunately it may actually not be.
Also, could I add to that, Dr. De Silva?
Sure.
There are 2 times during the year where we have to give actual registration over to the state with the application of this grant. So there's a fall enrollment registration report, and then again in the spring. So we didn't receive this year's grant until the month of May. So if we had 1 student attending, we would not have received $6,400. It would have been much less, but the charge for that bus would have been the same. So it is hard to get an answer because there is such fluctuation. I know last year we received $0 in grant funding, and the year prior to that was $1,300. So there is a fluctuation there that is impossible to pinpoint.
I would like to just a little more information about how this particular error would have occurred or could have occurred. And just, I guess that's simple.
If I were to predict how the error occurred, if I were to predict, and it's truly just a prediction, because I don't know, that transportation director is gone and our director of finance at that time is gone. But my prediction would be that we likely had another student in that area that was going to a different school or something like that. It could have been a student who had an IEP and was in that area, and therefore we were already picking up students, and so that just became part of the practice. And until really we read the policy, well, actually a couple things. The reason we discovered it is because of the vans. Because I was looking at the routes for the vans, and when I was trying to figure out which route I could pick up and drop off, there was this other route going to Trumbull where we were paying for extended hours, and that just led to other questions, and that's actually how we discovered it. And then when our new transportation director did some digging, and then we looked at the law, and we had other students that were looking to enroll, we wanted to just make sure that we were clear and communicative from the start.
Dr. De Silva was also, I think, because they had been remote during COVID.
Right.
So that was something that had come up after, when everybody was back in. I remember that was an element of it.
And we do support transportation through other CES programs under the auspices of special education. So that, I think, further complicated.
Two-part question. One is, could the new vans be used for something like this? Is there a whole the schedule for something like this?
So that was suggested. So the reality is, yes, there's always that possibility, but then it would remove another possibility to possibly pick up a high-cost transport. And so we did think about that, and if they were in that area, could they possibly pick up? There's a chance of that, but I wouldn't want to guarantee a family that's looking to make plans that is a for sure.
And then the second part is, are there any other districts that send kids there that we can align with?
So we did look at that, I believe, yes, right?
We have tried, yes, we have tried to partner and rideshare with other districts. And so far we have not been successful.
There is a private school in Trumbull that dozens of kids from Ridgefield go to. That might be what, I don't know, but that might be an option to discover. But it's a private school.
The challenge with this particular school is the hours, because it's a midday run, and so that complicates it. It does, I don't want to diminish the experience that the children are receiving, but it complicates it in terms of transportation. Because again, it's midday, so we have to have a vehicle available at that time. And then remember, the vehicle has to go back to pick them up. So that midday run, we don't have other students going to a school midday. So it works right now because we have a van that's a van or a bus that's available to us because we just happens to be available midday. But again, the afternoon, now we're sending out another vehicle, which has now extended hours to bring that student, which is really where the costs are, is around the extended hours.
I have another question, but I think you went.
Yes, Selena.
So it's really a comment, not a question. We have 4 students attending other magnets that aren't getting this benefit. We have other children in the district who go to private schools outside of Ridgefield who are not benefiting from this. And I realize it was a mistake, and I'm so grateful that we're finally digging into transportation, because it was such a mess when I got on this board, that I am infinitely grateful to the new transportation director and Jill and you for finding this stuff, because I'm sure there's others. So while we do need to apologize to these 4 students, it's highly inequitable to have just this school be treated this way. So I'm totally supportive of the recommendation, and I think we cannot afford to spend the transportation outside of Ridgefield for every student that goes outside of Ridgefield, and we don't. And so I think this is a fair compromise. So thank you for digging into it and finding it.
Selena?
So if, are these, they can't go though, I mean, they might not be able to go if they don't have transportation because it's midday, right? So that's kind of what we're deciding.
So that's true.
But if
So
they had IEPs, they could go, right?
Not there. In other
I mean,
words,
They're
it's
not being
different.
placed
It's a different.
there for, it's
Right.
not a special education program.
But that's, so, but, I mean, these children obviously have some sort of, you know, exceptional talent or something. I mean, there's some reason that their parents think that they should be attending these schools, and now they might not be able to go, and that's.
For sure, that there is an interest on the part of the family or the part of
Yeah.
the student that would like a different experience than what our high school perhaps can offer them, or they just want some, I can't identify what those reasons are, but every student, every family makes different choices for themselves. So yes, that's true. The second part of it is complicated because it's a midday, it's
Right.
it's a half day. But it is different than a student that is being placed in a specialized program where we are required and legally bound to provide transportation. So this is a little bit different. Again, some of the other options like ride shares, it's harder because of the midday run.
I would hope that we could find a solution, like, you know, ride sharing, like with Wilton or something. Like, I would hate to see these kids miss this opportunity.
Sure, and I know that Jill looked as a recent, and our new transportation Billy, probably a month and a half ago or 2 months ago, was looking at options for ride shares outside of this practice, this issue, because we're just looking at ways in which to save money, quite frankly. The transportation it's incredibly expensive. It's incredibly expensive, and it's a big, big part of our budget. And so just taking a step back and looking outside the box is something that and there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of work to do in the area of transportation that I think we can still grow in, but this is a small thing, and but it's small but big, because the reality is, like I said earlier, it is $11,000. You remember, these are my kids too, and I want them to experience what they hope to experience. It's $11,000, a little bit over $11,000 now. We don't know what that cost is going to be next year. So to assure someone of something, or assure this board, or assure the community of it being $11,000 too, it may be 15, it may be 55, it could be 75, and that's the cost that we pay sometimes for getting a bus, and then again those extended hours.
One other idea that might,
I was just gonna say, the grant that we applied for, that the $6,000 that we got, are parents able to apply for that? Is there a grant or a way that they can apply for something to help them with funding for transportation?
So that it's very creative. Jill, we talked about this briefly. I can't remember whether or not the parent can receive the funding that comes from the grant for their individual child, let's say, to pay somebody that could transport them on their own. Do you know if that's an option?
That is not my understanding of how it works. It's the school district have received this grant if the school district is providing transportation. I do not know of a grant that goes to the individual parent, but I could certainly look into that and get back to you, but I do not know of such a grant.
Sounds like a great job for somebody.
Could we allow or look into self-pay for transportation for the school if we have the contract, if we have enough people, split it by 4 people, right now, you know, and still get the grant, but have it be reimbursed by the parents that are getting, you know, essentially beyond the fair and appropriate education. And the other kids aren't getting that in Stanford and Danbury, and nor are the kids that are, they're staying here, right? So, nor are other students, you know, kids who go to St. Mary's get transportation, kids who go outside of the border of Ridgefield do not. So this is a highly inequitable situation for all the other kids beyond those four. So is there a possibility that parents could contribute and we could help that way and still provide it, but they have to pay?
Yeah, so we thought about that option also. I think we could, to Jill's point, we apply for the grant, then we have to provide the transportation.
Zero cost.
Correct, right, we would have to provide the transportation to the parent. So what we thought about originally was, could we, let's say we received $6,500 from the state, and there was, you know, another $6,500 left to pay, could they divide that among the four of them? But that's not an option.
Okay.
I do believe that we even did the calculation of what it might possibly cost.
Yeah.
It ended there.
Well, then that, just to the point you brought up earlier, so this would be four people, or families splitting $11,202 this year. So that's great, but next year, what if it's 60,000?
Right.
Yep.
Or 50,000, now those parents are gonna have to split 12,500, and now, is that gonna be doable for them? And so we're back sort of in the same situation.
But it sounds like it would be 18,000 anyway, because we wouldn't even get the grant.
Potentially.
Right, and that's assuming that we're not using or needing that bus
Right.
slots available. It
Or
just happens
four
to be
kids becomes
available
three
right
kids
now.
becomes two kids, so now
Yeah.
two families are splitting.
What would the cost be, Jill, if that bus wasn't available, we had to charge another one?
Well, I think
I can't give you an exact figure on that, but, that does make a very significant difference. Even when we were talking to the state, they asked us, why is it so low? It's so low because we're utilizing the vehicle for the other school.
because it would probably be about 55 plus add-on extended hours, because that's what we'd have to have the bus and then add the hours.
So I'm looking at who is in the program right now, and it's 2 freshmen and 2 sophomores. And so next year, those so this coming year, they're going to have transportation provided. And so they will be juniors next year? Yes?
So they would
We'll
have,
have 2 sophomores, 2 juniors,
So
yes.
next year will be 2 sophomores, 2 juniors. So by the time the
Yes.
transportation is expired, we'll have 2 juniors and 2 seniors who may have their licenses at that point.
Right.
Are they then allowed to drive themselves? And if they don't have their licenses yet, or don't have a car, or something like that, what are options for them? Do we have any recommendations? Do their parents have to pick them up, or what are other reasonable options for them?
so I think we've processed most of them. So right now, they have a year that we're recommending that they have 1 year, which, I'm sure it's not what parents want, and I'm sorry about that, of course, but it is 1 year to look to see what other options are available. I would certainly recommend that the 4 parents, if it's possible, I don't know what family situations are, but if possible, maybe they could do a carpool. Because yes, there's a cost, but that cost is over time. And if they were comfortable with doing a carpool, again, that midday complicates things because most people can't leave work midday if they're working, but if that's an option, then everybody contributes to gas or something like that if someone's available. Once the children hit their senior year, we would have to check with the school whether or not they're allowed to come and park there. My guess is that's probably allowed in your senior year. So certainly that's an option, but that could be an option for them to drive, let's say, their peers. So that's not an option. So the younger students would still be at a disadvantage. It's the struggle that magnet schools have, quite frankly, is that we pay for the tuition. We do that, we're required to. And we're happy that kids find a different experience that works for them. But at the same time, it's the challenge because when it comes to transportation, it's not something that communities, I think most communities are offering.
Is it possible for us to reach out to the students the families of the students who are attending Stanford? it's clear that they figured it out, something that works for them. I don't know if it's one family or three families or two families. Danbury's probably not as big a deal, but I'm sure Stanford figured it out. I mean, just anecdotally, my child had to go to school in Southport so he could learn how to read. And that's a 45-minute drive each way. And we were able to figure it out by, again, carpooling with another family that actually lived in Wilton, so we would Wilton school. But so we figured it out. So it's doable. And if you know, you do what you need to do for your children. You know, we were fortunate that we were able to do that, but there are solutions.
Yeah, I think the difference between the other magnet schools and this one is that midday.
Yeah. Oh no.
It's the midday.
Yeah,
Because I
that
think
makes
that makes
carpooling
like many of
great.
us, we manage dropping
Agreed.
off our children before the day and getting to work and picking them up at the midday.
That was our
So
solution.
is it possible, and I know that would completely change it, because they start off in Ridgefield and then they switch in the middle of the day, which seems like it's a really wonderful combination, but is there the option to go to RCA in the morning?
I'm not sure if that's, looks like someone in the audience. Mr.
No,
Bowman?
that is not an option. The
Yeah.
RCA's program is afternoons only.
Yeah. Okay, so.
Sure.
We're not supposed to speak
Long
in
answer.
public.
Yeah, we're not supposed to.
But, yeah, so the answer.
According to their website, no, it's 1:30 to 1:30.
Oh, you did.
Thank you.
Thank
Just-
you. Are there any other questions?
So I'll just summarize that this is
Sure.
hard for us. We are in the business of kids and we're in the business of supporting families. So this wasn't easy, but we learned of it. And knowing that we had a policy that we were not following, it felt like the right thing to do to give families some notice. And if the board agrees, I think a year's notice is fair. Understanding that it's also, it's June, right? It's the end of June, we're gonna be in July, so it's, you know, to turn it around any sooner than that feels a little bit unfair. But from that point on, our recommendation, especially with all the unknowns, would be that it be this year. And we'll look to set up carpools and that type of thing, if that's an option, the families are willing to share information, we'll be glad to do that as well.
Any other comments? The motion is on the floor. We have a second. All those in favor of accepting the recommendation and the motion as presented by Rachel? All in favor? Thank you. And Dr. De Silva, you will update us if
Yes.
all right. Moving on to the next.
So I move that the Board of Education authorize Ridgefield Public Schools Director of Finance Jill Brown, Assistant Business Manager Nicholas Cars, as designated signatories for all district bank accounts presented to the board on June 27, 2022, effective July 1st, 2022.
Do we have a second? Sean? All right.
So I don't think much discussion is needed on this one. Jill, I don't know if there's anything that you need to share on the bank accounts, but we're just changing over and updating all our accounts. For those that are wondering who Nicholas Harris is, he's right behind John Mansfield. He's been visiting Board of Ed meetings. There he is. And now the Assistant Business Manager, and I think he's substituted for Wes a little bit tonight too. But those are the changes on the accounts. And this will allow us to get to all those banks and make those changes, which hasn't been fun.
Yeah, right. Any questions? Right. All those in favor of approving this? All in favor, thank you. Moving on to the next. Discussion and possible action and update. On request of the board, that's Dr. Betsy.
Yes, so, Dr. Hanaway, Joe, and myself went to the Board of Finance to share, some context to our recommendation, which was to use the insurance adjustment, I don't really want to say it's savings because that's not really what it is, the one-time insurance adjustment for the purpose of playgrounds. Just as a reminder, it is the town that's responsible for the playgrounds, not the Board of Ed. I think that was a transition over time. And we've had a very strong partnership with the town in identifying what the accessibility needs are for our playgrounds, in addition to not just accessibility, right, the updates that are needed for our playgrounds. We've also had great partnerships with our PTAs and our communities who have helped fund the playgrounds over time. And what we were really looking for, or maybe offering a creative idea on how maybe we can get these playgrounds a little kickstart, because what we found is that over time, I think there really hasn't been a structure or a plan, a systematic plan. There are a couple of reasons, because we needed this accessibility report, which the Board of Selectmen, or the town, at least I won't say the Board of Selectmen, but the town had been working towards, and they finally had that completed. And now there's really an opportunity to say, hey, let's get a kickstart. So we thought we had a creative idea, and this isn't going to stop us. We'll continue to bring our creative ideas, but we were hopeful that they would use that insurance money for a kickstart on those playgrounds. The Board of Selectmen unanimously approved us moving forward to the Board of Finance with the idea, and then the Board of Finance did hear us, and I think their challenge that they were facing was that the playgrounds had not been approved by the community. And so their recommendation was, I don't think that they thought it was a bad idea, but that their recommendation was that it really should go through a process, and, you know, on the capital side. And so that was one request. The second request, and we had about $520,000 that we believed we would have available to us. We also shared at the Board of Finance meeting that that was a conservative number. We also have monies coming in from TRB retirement, which is the Teacher Retirement Board's retirement. So that should push that number up a little bit. How much so, I'm not exactly sure yet, and we didn't want to put a number out there without knowing that it was exactly what that number was going to be. So on the conservative side, it was 520. We also asked in our memo to the Board of Finance that they consider, and maybe it was strategic thinking on our part, that look at the projects that have been approved related to security, and perhaps use any additional funding outside of the insurance, because in our minds we had that already slated for the playgrounds, but outside of insurance, if there were any monies left over from operating this year, that be used for already pre-approved security projects. So projects that Joe had already brought forward. One was the vestibule at Branchville, and second were the bollards across several different schools that were like a 2-year project. I think 1 year was approved, then COVID. I think the second year was supposed to come back, but then COVID hit and other project happened. So we asked them to consider that with any additional surplus beyond the insurance that the Board of Education budget has. And they were open to that, but not necessarily with the funding in which with the Board of Ed operating funding. So they asked us to go back to the Board of Selectmen and ask them to increase the capital approval monies to allow for this. And they also, I think, were going to communicate themselves to the Board of Selectmen to possibly use ARPA funds. I'm not sure where that landed. But we were coming to the Board of Ed, back to the Board of Ed, to ask you if you would like us to go to the Board of Selectmen and ask them to use additional funds to complete these security projects. So that's question 1. And if so, then we'll communicate the same type of memo. We'll revise it a little bit. We'll bring it to the Board of Selectmen, and I believe within 15 days, they have to bring it to the Board of Finance. So with your approval, we'll draft that memo and bring it to the Board of Selectmen. I want to be clear that it's just on the security projects, not on the playgrounds.
Will that give us enough time to complete the projects?
Great question. We asked that same night.
The bollards, will probably not be able to do it for the new schools that we earmarked those for. The vestibule at Branchville, they're holding the price for 30 days. And I'm working to try to get a commitment to get that done in early August.
I asked last meeting, but I didn't get a figure. How far underwater are we on these two projects?
Right now, as it stands with the current pricing, $229,607.
Which is almost exactly how much we got short on our ECR funding by the state. Just putting that out there.
So Board of Finance Finance was pretty positive though, I thought, and if we came back and asked for an additional capital request, it went through Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance. I think Mr. Ulmer even said maybe like by July, right, we could get it.
Yes, because of that timing. I think the question likely will be at the Board of Selectmen is that they probably too have projects that have been put off because of costs being far more than they anticipated. So I imagine that will be the same dilemma that they're in. Obviously, I work for the Board of Ed, and I'm going to advocate for the children of the Board of Ed, and these security projects are important, so I will, if the Board of Ed agrees, I will draft that memo in collaboration with Jonathan and send that to the Board of Selectmen.
I have a question. Is that all vestibules though?
No,
Or
no, no.
just a couple, right?
That's just Branchville. Scotland, we're actually going to be breaking ground at the end of July. That'll be up by the start of school. And then we do have Scotland, Barlow, and Ridgebury are already scheduled for the bollards.
Right.
Yeah,
So we still have, there's a couple of schools that are left out.
we have 10 going in at Ridgefield, 4 going in at Scotts Ridge, 4 going in at Farmingville, and 6 going in at Branchville.
So certain schools already have vestibules.
Right,
Right.
right. Okay, so we're
Ridgefield
all,
and Scotland.
so we'll all be set though with
No.
that.
No, so your
That's what I'm
question is,
asking.
does every school have a vestibule?
Or
And by the time Branchville's done, we still have one
a
more,
protected
right?
vestibule by the time we're
We
finished.
still have, we still have to do work on Veterans Park and Barlow.
By the time we're
But
finished.
they
so
do
they'll all-
have vestibules. We just need to harden them, that's all.
Okay, but we're going to do all, I guess that's my question.
The ultimate goal was, but what I learned from being at the Board of Finance meeting is, that I believe that there is, a strong advocacy to have, before funding happens, they want that support from the community with the intention of what the monies were spent for. So for example, with the playgrounds, the money wasn't slated for that. And so it's not that they're opposed to playgrounds, I don't think that that's the case at all, but they believe that they should go through the process.
Right.
And it's not that I disagree with that, however, I also have accessibility needs that I'd like to attend to. And there are some playgrounds that really need to be tended to sooner than later. And so recognizing that we received the report a little bit later and that, the partnership happened further down the line, I think it was a good gesture to get it started, again, because it's needed. But that said, we will continue the partnership with the town and the playgrounds, and we'll try to sort through that, as I said before. And with respect to security, we'll bring that forward to the Board of Selectmen. And there are other security projects that you'll see in years ahead with capital. But it really, that pre-approved, or that already approved, is an important piece for, I think, the Board of Finance. That was the message that I heard. Do you agree, Dr. Hanley?
Yes, I agree.
Any answer? Jill, you were there. Do you agree? Okay. Okay, so the board agrees. All right, so Jonathan and I will draft that memo. We'll try to do that sooner than later before we respond to the summit.
All right, moving on to policies, this is first read.
Yes.
Rachel, do you want me to just read?
Sure, so we have 4 policies in front of you this evening for a first read. The first one is policy 1330, use of buildings and grounds. So it's in front of you, Dr. Greenwood and Mr. McNamara led us through a discussion of this policy on a site supervisor fee. No language revision is needed in the current policy around this discussion that we had. If you look in the policy, the 3rd paragraph up, it does talk about supervision, that groups having permission to use certain facilities and equipment shall be permitted to do so as long as such use is under the supervision of a school employee or other authorized person. So what would happen is a fee schedule for a supervisor, but that would fall under the regulations of this policy, and thus that would occur to the Board of Education. The committee recommended just in the first line a little language change there, and then I just wanted to make sure with administration, is the process okay for applications in this policy? Do we want to change anything or add any language about electronic submission, possibly in that second paragraph?
So we didn't feel like that was necessary primarily because we do have the electronic submission option, but it doesn't always work with every particular situation, depending.
Yeah.
So that's one piece, and just as a point of reference, in this policy, right after the number 3, this is paragraph 3, it talks about the annual fee schedule. So we'll bring that back to you August 22nd at our next board meeting. The reason we're holding off is because Jill wanted to have an opportunity to look at fees and understand what costs are, what the increases are in partnership with Joe. And then we'll bring those to you at the next board meeting.
Any questions? Ken?
What's the reference to or its designated agent? Is that even necessary to be part of the language?
Where are you, Ken?
Very first.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry. Only because then does the board have to approve the designation?
I think, I'm not sure about the word agent, but but my guess is it probably means like designee, like
Sure.
us, for example.
Right, but what, are there other designees?
No, not on this.
So then,
Well, actually, so I would think Parks and Rec, right, with the approval of grounds, Joe?
Correct, and then it goes through the whole district, from building principal, down through my office and then into Jill's. So there's several sign-offs along the way.
But so the language or designated agent, so rather than it being designee, I think that's probably why that language is there, because of the partnership that we have with the other organizations that use the grounds as well.
so then are we saying that, is the Board of Education giving Parks and Rec permission to do that? Otherwise, they're not our designee.
I'd back it up one layer.
Yeah.
I don't think this is a board purview, I think this is a district purview. We don't own those buildings, we don't schedule those buildings. Why are we involved?
Exactly.
We do.
The board does,
The board,
Well,
the district does.
ultimately, but it's the board. So it's the board who then allows us, it's the way our policies are written, right, is the Board of Education ultimately is responsible, but then you have the designated agent. Designated agent who then, creates a structure, a system in which our grounds are used. Right? So we have contracts with Parks and Rec, we have contracts with the town, we have ourselves. So I think that's probably why the language is there and used in that way.
so did the Board of Ed enter into the contract with the Parks and Rec?
Yes.
Or did the,
Yes,
Or did
so we have
administration?
Jonathan Steckler signs those contracts.
But we also have town that uses our grounds and buildings, right, when we have, public hearings and we have budget meetings.
Correct.
And when we have voting, we
Carnival.
do, yeah.
Right, and those all get signed off.
So we are part of it.
okay, but then, okay, I give up. Then I would just change it to agents, plural.
Or it's agents.
Or designees if we wanted to.
That's it.
I like designated agents.
I feel like agent works here because it's a
Yeah.
more of an organization than a person.
But it should be plural.
Yes.
Designated agents.
So we take a legitimate and just agents?
No,
Designated
designated.
agents.
They would be designated through contract. or-
Yeah, that's.
Any other questions on this policy? Okay, so I'll come back for a second read. Moving on, so the next 3 are all brand new. So this is new, this is improving completion rates of FAFSA. So as per the shipment good run policy update of June 16, 2022, Public Act number 21-199 directs boards of education not later than July 1st, 2022, to adopt a policy to improve completion rates of the FAFSA by students enrolled in grade 12 or an adult education program maintained by the board. So Dr. Greenwood and Mr. Houlihan led the discussion here. They did a great job. Mr. Houlihan, during our committee meeting, presented a presentation, including some background and preliminary information about FAFSA and RPS. Dr. Beamer and Mr. Nolan also went through the policy and regulations with suggested edits. So in front of you, you'll see some edits in front of you, like, in the first paragraph, we have now included trade and vocational school. That was part of our conversation. Also, we took out some language, in the second paragraph. The words were, and assisted in completion of FAFSA. And Dr. Silva had checked with council for us, and we were allowed to take that out. Any questions?
That was courtesy of Sean.
Yeah.
Yes.
What is our current completion rate of FAFSA? What are we trying to improve it to?
Yeah, so great question. Higher than what we originally thought. Do you have that data in front of you, Jake?
Yeah, John, do you want to project that really quick? I did pull that up in case the
Thank
question
you.
came up.
Yeah. I mean, and while he's doing that, my recommendation would be to change the title of this policy to encourage the completion of the FAFSA or something, because if we're trying to improve something, it implies it's done when we've improved it.
The problem is it's a state mandate.
Well, but that doesn't mean.
Another unfunded state mandate.
Well, I mean, it's just the title of the policy should just be our policy on completion of the FAFSA for seniors. You know what I mean? Like,
I like that actually very much.
I mean, most families here, a lot of families, not most, a lot of families know that it's a separate, so.
So, we actually, Jake, can you see it? Or?
Not heavy.
Well, I'm looking at it on my screen, yeah, I can't see what you're looking at, but I'm actually looking at the form. Can you hear me okay, right?
Yeah.
It's actually.
Okay, sorry, I just want to check that. So I pulled two pieces of data for you. The first chart is just our DIRG, and you can see that amongst our DIRG, we actually have the highest completion rate. We're at 57.1, heading down to all the way down to Darien at 39.8. But I think what might be more interesting is, I believe the intention of the policy from the state is probably to get some of our larger and more urban schools to complete it. They probably would, I'm guessing, that they would prefer to have their numbers higher than ours. So I pulled on the bottom chart just the largest school districts in the state just for comparison, and you can see that theirs are lower than pretty much the entire DIRG. So my guess is the intention of from the state is geared towards trying to get these rates up of the larger schools. But I think there's an important point to all of this is each of the bullet points in the policy we do. So this is a low lift from us. So we're adding the policy, but we're not really changing what we do because we do most of it through developmental counseling and parental programming already.
Yeah, that's why I just suggest we change the title of this to reflect Ridgefield, because we're not trying to improve. We're just trying to ensure students and parents are aware that they should provide all of their financial information via the FAFSA to the federal government, and 99% of the time get nothing for it but a $5,500 loan without even interest covered. But we don't have to say that in the title, of course.
No, that's a little wordy. That's a little wordy. There'll be lots of commas in that one.
But maybe just to encourage the completion of FAFSA for students.
Actually, I think that's a good word, encouraging. I don't know though, I will have
It would be
to.
up against the state requirements.
Well, the title of the policy though isn't driven by the state. The policy itself simply says they want everyone to vote. I read it.
Well, you can check it out.
I can, yeah.
It's the first read, we're gonna come back
Yeah.
to it, so.
Because Liz, it also, if we're gonna change that word, in the third, fourth line down, it talks about improving
Yeah.
again, so if we use the word encouraging,
Yeah,
or something like that.
something like that.
Okay.
And we do say encourage to complete the FAFSA in the second paragraph down.
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
I'll do that
the
with
fourth
Jen.
one.
Okay, so we'll come back with title.
Yeah, it does change, so thematically, we're gonna have to change a lot of it thematically. Just because in order to improve the completion rate, so it'll, just a little wordsmith. And since we're there, we could fix the margins on the second and third part.
Yes, that's true.
You're gonna come back, right, for the second reading?
I can't do the second, right? Miss it.
We'll send it to you for that.
That's it.
Any other questions on this policy? Comments?
The only other question I have is the task force. If we're already leveraging the developmental counseling, couldn't we just reference that instead of adding another committee, task force?
Oh, okay, so
Yeah, I
that
can speak to that if you want.
Well, hold
So
on.
yeah, we were talking about using our counselors for that in terms of the task force. Yeah, we're not expecting to add any staffing or anything to do that with. I'm not seeing that.
The most.
That's the wording that came from the state.
Yeah, so the concern I have isn't you guys, it's when, 20 years from now, when you decide to retire, and this policy hasn't been updated. That's what because that's what happens, right?
Yep.
The intent of you, and somebody comes in and says, oh, well, we need a task force now, and all of a sudden you put an administrative bureaucratic burden on a bunch of people that didn't really need it.
So
Just saying.
all I'm gonna say is the regulations we're not gonna vote on because those are not in our purview. But, Dr. Greenwood and Mr. Houlihan were really kind enough to go through them with us. And we literally got this on a Thursday and we had our meeting Monday night.
Yes.
So I really do appreciate all their deep dive on that.
So the regulations, we should be able to shift if you guys agree.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll take
That's the
this now.
administration.
Or,
Got it. Moving on.
So the next one is gifted and talented student program. So as per the recent update, section 2 of Public Act 21-199, local and regional boards of education are required to develop a policy not later than July 1st, 2022 for the equitable identification of gifted and talented students. So this was a policy that Ms. Gillette and her curriculum team also made edits to before it came to us, which we really appreciated. And then also Mr. Corbishley and Dr. Hanaway led the discussion through this because it was good for us to be educated about gifted and talented students, the process, the PPT. So in looking at this policy, you'll see purpose, you'll see it talks about PPT, creative arts, educational programming, multiple measures, final determination, early identification, and then guidelines to follow. Are there any questions on this policy? Okay, so that'll come back then for a second read. Thank you all. Yes.
The next meeting will be after.
Yes.
The policy, the date.
So our policy, when I looked it up, because I have it here, so it's 9311. So 3 of these policies, the law says to adopt by July 1st, 2022. However, I do feel comfortable that we could do the second read in August. Because they've gone through policy committee, we're at a first read with the board. FAFSA, advanced curriculum, which we'll do next, and gifted and talented, they all come from the same public act. But their updates are really already our current practice as a district. And it's the summer, and we'll approve it second read before the kids come back in the fall. So I think we're okay. And if I might add, just one more thing. So I got an update from Shipman and Goodwin, and they're like, oh yeah, plan to do this in the fall.
Okay.
So
Perfect.
we're
Holy thought out state timeline.
good.
You should see the list.
Maybe.
And thankfully for Rachel, she's on top of these policies because there's a lot of them. Thankfully we have Rachel.
Rolling in. Okay, next one. So we have another new one, advanced course or program and challenging curriculum. So as per the recent update, section 3 of Public Act 21-199, it requires each local and regional board of education to adopt a policy or revise an existing one, again, not later than July 1st, 2022, concerning the eligibility criteria for student enrollment in advanced course or program. Also, section 5 of that Public Act requires each Board of Education to adopt a challenging curriculum policy that aligns with the State Department of Education. Shipman and Goodwin have combined these 2 updates into one policy. And Mr. Corbishley did a great job and he led us through this policy. The purpose is in the first paragraph there, that we understand the importance of providing opportunities for students to enroll in an advanced course or program and offering students challenging curriculum in Ridgefield Public Schools. Are there any questions on a first read of this? And this is current practice, as I understand.
It's really about communication and access for students. So making sure that we are really clear as we transition students from middle school to high school, what's available to them, making sure we're paying attention to students who are achieving in the areas that they're achieving, and making sure that those pathways are opened up whenever they're ready for them. And communicating with parents, so it's not just the students,
And
it's the parents.
And I'd add that looking at multiple ways in which kids have access to these highly challenging courses, and not just looking at one access point in which they get there. And I think we're very fortunate that our team believes in offering opportunities, equity, and access for all kids. And so there are multiple opportunities that are available to them. I think this is one of those policies that wasn't necessarily geared towards community like ours, but communities like ours, where I think we already have a lot of these structures in place, but it's to ensure the communities that don't have these structures in place now have them.
Right, one of the most important things to underscore, I love that we offer the program, we offer access to the program, but it says very clearly, the student, parent, or guardian may decline to implement the provisions of this plan. I'm all about high achieving kids, I have high achieving kids, the stress level that sometimes the kids put on themselves and the parents put on the kids can outweigh the benefits.
Yeah, and we see that on our team when we make a recommendation and a parent sometimes elects to override it, and then the child is struggling, and it impacts them in ways that we would not want to see. While at the same time we continue to support them and do whatever we can to differentiate within that space. But you're right, it's some kids will push themselves just too far.
Great, so these will come back for second read, guys, in August with the recommendations that we're taking here today. Thank you.
Moving on to the last item on the discussion of possible action items. Do we have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education approve the Administrator Evaluation and Support Plan introduced on June 13th and again on June 27th, 2022.
So Karen couldn't be here tonight, and I'm here to take any questions.
I'll second.
Thank you, sorry, no questions. Any questions?
I was hoping for commentary from the dog again.
It's time to go back.
You look so bad.
We got a lot of comments last time, that's great.
You've heard it so much, you know.
Everybody must be listening.
So no questions, comments? All right, all those in favor of approving this plan, please raise your hands. Unanimously, thank you. Right, items of information, the enrollment update.
Oh,
So I
I
am no substitute for Karen, but before you is the enrollment update, and I'm here with any questions. However, I do, before questions, I want to follow up on a question that Sean had the last month about preschool enrollment versus kindergarten. So, one of my theories was accurate, and there was another piece I didn't know fully. So the question was, preschool numbers have jumped exponentially from the projected. Why are we not seeing the same impact in projected for kindergarten next year? First reason is the vast majority of students, 75% of them who qualified this year were 3, so we wouldn't feel them yet. The second is that we have 10 eligible students moving into a TK program next year who are K eligible as well, transition kindergarten program, which is an atypically high number. We may see a couple in a given year, but 10. The other thing is there's more transition K programs open now. When I started in Ridgefield, there were 3, and now I think there's at least 5, if not 6. So there's more options for parents, which means more times that work for them, childcare, all that stuff. So that's the two reasons for that.
So that's more feeders coming into the school, you're saying?
Yes, so it'll be interesting to see, are we gonna see a bubble?
Right.
And when we do the demographer's projection next year, obviously that's not something they can take into account, but they will have this data.
So the question I would have there is those students that go to transition kindergarten, instead of coming to kindergarten here, would then have the opportunity to come to kindergarten.
They are eligible to come to kindergarten.
First grade.
Right, or they're eligible to come to first grade, because kindergarten is not compulsory in the state of Connecticut, so they can come straight to first.
So we could see the numbers in either space.
Right. Most of the time, we see that they come into kindergarten, most of the time. It's not common that they go directly into first grade. Other than that, I will take questions if there are others.
Please ask them. I want to watch this happen live.
Karen already said.
I'm sure I can come up with something.
Yes. Give me a
Okay,
list.
give me a list.
It's a beautiful report. I like I love how you bolded and then unbolded.
Scan is perfect.
Scan's perfect. Scan of the.
When you
Oh, I
copy.
didn't notice.
Can't laugh up your
No, no, it's Liz, I was pointing out how good.
Right, no questions, moving on.
Okay, and then the next report of Karen's is the updated staffing report with, now we, have all mostly a heavy amount of retirees, resignations and new hires.
Any questions on that? Moving on. Rachel? Correspondence.
Would anyone else like to make a public comment at this time? Okay, so moving on to correspondence report, we have received 11 emails since our last Board of Education meeting. One email provided shared feedback on the Choose Love movement. 6 emails regarded the health and safety of students related to COVID. 1 email shared feedback on Juneteenth. 1 email shared feedback on the projected surplus allocation. 1 email regarding the transportation concern. 1 email shared support for future budget for increased security.
Thank you. We're at the end of the meeting. Do you have a motion to adjourn?
I so moved.